shop. Today we're going to take a few moments to talk about pistons. We're going to talk about loading those pistons with the rings, that is, and then installing those pistons into an engine block. The engine we're going to be using today is a small block Ford. It's a 302, but this information is pretty generic, and it can cross a lot of different manufacturers. So whether you're working on a Chevy, a Mopar, a Ford, or even something imported, stick around and take a look at this stuff, because like I said, a lot of this stuff is kind of the same. So let's jump into it. We're going to start with some of the tools we need to get this going. Here it goes. Alright guys, here's the tools we need to get this done. Piston ring pliers, piston ring compressor, either a solid one or the adjustable kind like this, a wrench for the end cap bolts, a hammer, and we're not going to use that end, we're actually going to use that end, the piston cap and bearings, acetone to keep stuff clean, and some assembly lube. And also along the assembly lube line is some kind of container full of clean motor oil, and I'll show you what that's for in a second. That's basically all the tools we need. Okay guys, first things first, we've got all our parts laid out here. An empty piston with the connecting rod bearing installed. These are just protectors, thread protectors for the it protects the crank from the threads here of the connecting rods. Anyways, we're going to identify our oil pack. So the oil pack consists of one expander ring and a top and bottom keeper, and then you're going to have two compression rings, and typically they're going to be different. They have different configurations and shapes. Your literature that comes with your piston rings are going to tell you more about which ring goes where. So we want to make sure our piston's nice and clean. I've ran mine through, I've got a drum of safety clean parts cleaner over there, and I've ran it through there, and these pistons are clean, and then I blow it out with compressed air. So I know the pistons are clean. So what I'm doing now is I'm just taking a rag and wiping down these rings to ensure that nothing's on them. Okay, so loading these pistons, the first thing we're going to do is load this expander ring. It can go either way. Typically with most pistons that is that way as well, but always reference your literature there. So the expander ring, and then I always start with the bottom oil ring. And one of the things you want to make sure is that your expander ring didn't overlap. You can see it right here on this one if it focuses, maybe not, but they're not overlapped. They're just butting up next to each other. And also you don't want, whoops, I almost dropped it. You don't want to slide those down. Pick it up and then move it into position. Don't just slide them down, because that will scratch the side of the piston. Remember, that piston's going to be friendly with the cylinder bore. So we're just going to pick it up and slide it into place. Okay. Now, theoretically, there should be little to no compression passing these two pistons. So lining up the oil ring gaps probably isn't necessary, but I always do it anyway. It's just kind of good habit. I got one over here and then one over the wrist pin on this side. And next up is the compression ring. I know which one my bottom compression ring is because it's labeled. Let's see, there it is. And often they'll have like a dot or something that tells you, hey, this end is up or whatever. So there's the pliers. You can see they just expand that. You don't want to go nuts because these rings are cast iron and they can pop on you. So that goes in the second one. Whoops. Second ring land. There we go. And we've got it facing up. And then we'll take this top ring, which has no orientation, it can go either way, and we'll put it in the top ring land in the same fashion. There we go. Now those are loaded up. And again, you'll want to offset your ring gap. So I just keep it simple and throw them over the wrist pin. The bottom one's on one side, the top one's on the other. So now you've got your loaded piston. Alright guys, next up is that tub of oil I was explaining earlier. What we like to do is sink the top end of the piston all the way down in the oil so it gets all around the oil, or the ring lands and everything. And also what I like to do is take my finger, dip it in here, and then run that down the walls of the cylinder, just to make sure that everything's adequately lubricated. Okay, next up we are going to prep our bearing surfaces. So there is one bearing already installed in the cap, just a liberal amount of assembly lube. And you're going to do the same thing for the piston side of the connecting rod. Just lube it up. It's good to go. That's it. Next thing we're going to do is I'm going to pull that out of there and load the piston into the compressor. Alright, so I've got the piston loaded with the arrow facing the front. I've got the crankshaft at the highest position in the hole. I'm just going to feed this down through. Piston skirt will drop right in. And make sure that the piston is nice and level. Or excuse me, the compressor is nice and level across the deck of the piston. Across the deck of the block. Okay. Make sure everything looks good, nice and squared up. Okay, now when you're doing this, you want to make sure you maintain some downward pressure and don't waste too much time, but don't beat the crap out of it, but just kind of give it a nice quick entrance into its new home. There it is. Piston is in the hole. And I will roll the engine over and show you what that next step looks like. Alright guys, now we will remove the thread protectors. Make sure everything looks good, nice and clean. And we're going to take the other end of the rod cap, make sure that we put it on the right direction. All mine have numbers on one side. So just make sure everything's nice and lubed up still. And we'll just slide it on. And now the nuts. Alright guys, that's it. Just a real quick and down and dirty kind of how-to on getting the rings loaded into the piston in the block. If you want more in-depth information, especially or specifically on the small block Ford, I do have an engine build series on my channel as well. So look that up. I think it's up to part 3 now, working on 4. So anyways, you have questions, you can leave them here or in either one of those 3 of those videos. Thanks guys.